when you're alive and you let awakening live as you, through you, it just becomes tantric. That's my experience. And then that starts to just like highlight itself in the amazing opportunity we in the modern day world seem to have in our lives, at least most of us. Wow, relationships, love, intimacy. That's the most challenging place. It's the most juicy place, the most alive place. So I think there's a, in quotes, purpose to a relationship is to allow us to experience this divine mystery of not two, but apparently two, and what happens when we meet beyond our conditioning. Especially once we learn to do that in a kind of deeper, ongoing way, based in our connection to soul, based in our connection to a source. It's like this mystery of two beings sourced within their own sovereign beingness, connected to the oneness that they are, dancing as this apparent two, and what occurs there. That's magic. That's beauty. That's good.
I don't like the idea that the honeymoon's over in 6 months, and that like the deepest part of me doesn't want to believe that that's true, and that I've had experiences where that's not true. But also that's so much what we hear in all the relationship literature, right? Like the hormonal thing, and you've got this and that, and then that goes away, and then you have to deal with like the real stuff. And I remember you telling me that if you are able to, like what you've described as like the golden thread, or you are able to find that sweet spot, that the honeymoon doesn't have to be over, and that it can keep getting better and better rather than staler and staler. Or
that's exactly right. And the key is, so it is my experience that at some point the stuff comes up. I mean, but
sometimes it's right away.
Yeah. I mean, if you're awake to it, it could be day 1, day 2, hour 1, whenever it comes up. It's either within an hour, a minute, or a week, or a year, or, some people 2 years, but that usually means you're going to get a backlash at some point because you've kind of been pushing it off to the side. So what I prescribe and what I live and what I've found is that if you deal with the stuff well, the stuff is the alchemy portal to this new paradigm of relating. It's a totally new way of relating that most of our culture has no clue about. And because most people have never lived this way, then it's kind of like common knowledge that basically like there's a honeymoon, then it gets hard, and then it goes downhill, and it gets stale, and you just deal with it, and you try to make the most of it, and wow.
Don't think that it can, and also like don't get up your expectations that it's going to be good like it was at the beginning, because now it's going to be different.
Yeah, exactly. And to me, that's a hell realm. Honestly, I could never do that.
Yeah. Well, I think it's also like what you're saying. If that intimacy that you're describing, that's like the sweetest thing, like better than surfing, better than that intimacy can happen in the difficult space.
Exactly.
It doesn't matter what the content of the space is if the connection is happening and each person is able to find that connection there.
Exactly. And if you have the skills, the tools, the courage, the
mentorship,
probably the support to meet that stuff well, it's the all powerful magical portal to this new life that creates ever deepening waves of intimacy, ever opening experiences of love, ever magical sense of like, oh my God, I'm waking up 5 years later with this person and they look more beautiful to me than they did. There's more glow in their eyes and their skin looks fresher and more magical because of this way of being. When you get into it, when you start to live in it, it cleanses the sense doors. It cleanses the soul. So you keep getting like a bath. Your heart and your soul just keep getting like exfoliated in this way that just brings more brightness, more clarity, more yum. more. Yeah, it's really, really, really good. And
I think of it kind of like dental flossing the meridians, you know, like you're in there with like dental flossing the nadis or.
yeah, it's definitely like it takes the willingness to meet the apparent grit, the stuff that's hard, the stuff that's vulnerable, the stuff that's challenging. And you get really, you start to get a feel for it, and you actually get drawn toward it in this way that is based in these qualities of humility, willingness to be vulnerable, willingness to be honest and forthright and like courageous in your communication, and not looking to control the outcome either for you or your partner or even as a couple. That's one of the magic parts of this, or one of the things that helps create the magic, is that I'm no longer looking to make sure this goes a certain way no matter what. I'm willing to just meet this in a state of innocence and discovery and openness to outcome, with this freaking raw, tender, scary thing going on right around in my heart and guts. Like this just happened for me and my partner last night. And we both, thank God, have a feel for this. And I made up this thing that I call the impact duration Richter scale. So if something triggers you at a certain impact for a certain duration on the Richter scale, then all of a sudden it's time to bring that into the field of connection. And I think of things like at a 2 on a scale of 10, like 2 to 3, both in intensity and duration, and all of a sudden the scales have tipped and it's time to bring it in. Like even if it's pretty small, you bring it in and you start to communicate about it and you look at it with your partner, and it's very vulnerable. And I have a partner who's willing and great at doing this, and I have cultivated that ability too. And so we'll just be like, oh, here it is. Oh, this is so uncomfortable. But then we meet it, we talk about it, we explore it. And if there is an alignment on the soul level, you will get to this place where that thing that was so scary and so challenging and felt so threatening actually makes you feel softer, closer, more open, and that exfoliated, cleansed heart. And then you come out the other side and you feel closer, you feel more trust, you feel more love. Now, sometimes if your souls are not in alignment for the next wave of bonding or staying together, then the clarity may come that it's time to lovingly release each other. Usually that's a deeper process and it's a deeper thing. But if you're in this alignment and you're with somebody that on the soul level is really, then the scary stuff, the hard stuff becomes the alchemizer of this bond. Now you don't need the hard stuff, but it's one key is that when hard stuff arises, you meet it well, you meet it lovingly, you meet it with these certain qualities. Now you don't need hard stuff, but what you do need is to get out of what I call the bandwidth of familiarity. This is the thing that kills relationships, kills lives, wastes time. It's one most precious thing we have, time on planet Earth. If you stay in this bandwidth of familiarity in a relationship, that's where things get stale. That's where they get boring. That's where problems occur later. People decide because something gets itchy inside and all sorts of mayhem can occur. But if you learn, not even when you have hard things, but you learn to get creative about getting out of this bandwidth of familiarity. And I often recommend people go in one of these two directions. Up here, it's kind of like exciting, edgy, enticing, novel. Like, hey, let's do something new. Let's do something fun. Let's even have a conversation. You don't even have to do a big thing. You can literally just play one of my intimacy games in bed at night before you go to sleep, and boom, you're creating this magic. So one of those games might be like, if I weren't shy, if I had drunk a potion and I weren't shy at all, I would say fill in the blank, or I would ask for fill in the blank. And then you play this game back and forth with your partner. So then you're out of the bandwidth of familiarity and you're in this kind of new creating something experience. And that's one of the things that sustains that honeymoon-like experience. Now, the other side, the other side of the bandwidth of familiarity is a little more uncomfortable. It's vulnerability. So up here is novelty, excitement, edginess. Down here is vulnerability, tenderness, transparency. So you can create games or moments of sharing that are based in this kind of heartful, vulnerable realness, and you will also feed the fires of yum, of intimacy, of connection, of like honeymoon-like love. So those are a couple little just tips on how to do this art form.
I'm curious about, when we met, you were on the Zen path.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, you went into the Ridwan school.
Mm-hmm.
And then now your terrain is mostly sexuality and sacred relating.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think one of the most common questions I get asked is, how do you make sex sacred? Or why sexuality? Like, why is sexuality the place that's so powerful? I think everyone sort of innately knows that, and so is either totally scared or pushing it away, or fantastically curious but don't know where to start about like what's next kind of thing.
Yes.
But I'd like to just hear from you, like, what is it? What's special about sexuality?
The reason sexuality has, for me, I didn't set out as like a tantric practitioner. I didn't set out like doing sexual stuff at all. I just followed the truth of my path wherever it led, with a lot of willingness to listen to the truth of my being and the universe's guidance, and the incredibly, like, I think this is pretty rare when I look around, and I think it's what allowed this whole thing to unfold, was like, okay, whatever I hear, whatever guidance I hear, I'm going to fucking do it. Like, whatever it is, I'm going for it, And so that willingness to listen, hear, and follow, that just led me to this experience of, so there was an awakening at some point. So I was on the path of awakening. So I did that. There's deep awakening. Wow. Okay. But there was no focus on sexuality. I liked sex, of course, it was great, but it wasn't like on my radar as like a thing. But then after this awakening and in the listening of my own being, there was a real strong, again, like that blooming impulse in my system had a really dynamic nature to it, like embodied, like, where does this want to show up? How does this awakening want to show up in life? How does it want to show up in this relationship? How does it want to show up as I walk through the world? And I was just listening again, following and following the guidance, little signs of the universe. And through that, just living it and listening to the little impulses of like, ooh, go study with this teacher, or, oh, read these books and practice that. So then I came across David Deda's work, and then I ran into this teacher named Shakti Malan. He's a South African tantric teacher, very unique but profoundly impactful in my life. And through dance and through any and all of that stuff, all of a sudden, boom, you got this very like, yeah, you kind of look at this guy and he's like, whoa, he seems to be into sex and intimacy and tantra and all that. And it's like naturally tantric. It's just a naturally, again, I don't even use the word tantra very often in what I teach. I just teach like, let's come alive and let's live it. But to me, it just happens to be a tantric experience when you're alive and you let awakening live as you, through you, it just becomes tantric. That's my experience. And then that starts to just like highlight itself in the amazing opportunity we in the modern day world seem to have in our lives, at least most of us. Wow, relationships, love, intimacy. That's the most challenging place. It's the most juicy place, the most alive place. Let's bring it there. So something in me just started to say, let's bring it all to this place. And it just, yeah, it's just sort of taken over at this point.
I've heard you say that you have kind of a soul radar is how I would call it, I'm a rolfer, so like when I look at someone, I can oftentimes see like what their bones in their face are doing, or like how I can see almost like X-ray. And I think what you see is like almost an energetic X-ray.
It's almost like feeling a flower from within, and you can feel where that flower is like inherently has an impulse to bloom, almost like if you think of a time-lapse photography of a flower, you see it at the bud stage and then it comes into this flower. And we as human beings are like that always. We're ever blooming flowers. So no matter where we're at, there's always the next. And so the perception that has kind of arisen for me or come online is the ability to kind of feel what that is. Like, where does that person's soul, spirit, life want to bloom, to become, to fountain? And also, where are there like blockages to that? What are the specific things that are kind of like catching that up? What is that person's particular conditioning pocket that's making that blooming difficult? And some insight on how to allow that to dissolve or melt or release so that the blooming can occur according to its blueprint, its inherent, almost like soul DNA, like it's wanting to bloom. It's like we're all these flowers or these soul trees that want to come into our wholeness and continue. It's like a continuing thing, but we also have these, I think we've come into our lives. Everyone I know has come into this life with some very, very specific blocks to that. So that's kind of the way my being can tune in and have this X-ray vision of another person's being. And it's pretty beautiful because it's bathed in love, and then it has the ability to serve that person's blooming. And that's what I do when I work with people, or when I work with couples. It's really, really miraculous. That's when it really gets like more vivid, and I can see how it's interplaying between those two souls and why they've drawn each other in, and how they're getting stuck in a dynamic that's keeping it from happening. And then I have the ability to kind of co-mutually unwind that and have this kind of like, I often call it a 3-for-1 deal when I'm working with couples, because each person is getting their most optimal optimization process, and the couple, the relating field, is getting optimized too and brought to that higher order of love and intimacy and relating, where it's out of a vicious circle stuck loop and into a positive feedback loop where the love gets more beautiful, more big, and deepens, or the clarity comes. And even if a couple decides to release each other, it's done from a place of, okay, well, that's the truth. That's the best place. And there's a love that serves the journeys of those two souls. It's quite elegant, quite beautiful.
And would you say, from your point of view, that that's the purpose of relationship?
The purpose is multifaceted, but if I was going to highlight two of the purposes of love relationship, one is that it just seems that it's the magic of life on planet Earth, is that we have this design where our deepest wounding, our deepest conditioning, the most sticky place in us is bound to get activated, touched on, and illuminated in the field of a connection, an intimate love connection. So it's actually, the stronger the love, the more powerful that connection, the more intense and beautiful the sexuality. It's like putting a really high light on that stuff. And in fact, I call it usually the plunger of love, because it's like plunging it up. It will bring it up really strongly and really intensely, the stronger the love. Now, it'll happen regardless. My experience, if you're bonding with another human being and you're going deep, your stuff is going to get illuminated, brought right into your face in a way that's usually very, very challenging, because it doesn't just come up it doesn't just go, ooh, yay, it's coming up. It comes up, blah, like the alien creature. It's like, just gets stuck in your whole being as a ultimately as something to get resolved and healed and released and metabolized and kind of brought back into its essential nature, which happens to be more capacity to be vulnerable, to be open, to love, to know this exalted state of magic. So that to me is the other purpose, is so that we can actually experience this mysterious magical thing where there are not two beings, but it is apparently two beings that when they dance together in this way, something is experienced that can't be experienced any other way on planet Earth. Or who knows, maybe even in the universe. You know, it's good stuff. In some ways, it's the best that planet Earth has to offer, in my opinion. Like I love life on planet Earth. I love lots of things, you know, dancing, surfing, skiing, swimming in the ocean. That's all awesome. It's great. And then there's this thing called like a true experience of intimacy, and not in a moment, but also over time. Like, whoa, what is that about? That's amazing. So I think there's in quotes, purpose to a relationship is to allow us to experience this divine mystery of not two, but apparently two, and what happens when we meet beyond our conditioning. Especially once we learn to do that in a kind of deeper, ongoing way, based in our connection to soul, based in our connection to a source. It's like this mystery of two beings sourced within their own sovereign beingness, connected to the oneness that they are, dancing as this apparent two, and what occurs there. That's magic. That's beauty. That's good.